This is Kanzenshuu, the podcast, episode 517 for the week of March 9th, 2025. Well, hello, welcome back to Kanzenshuu,
the podcast. I forgot my part. Shit. Was that my part?
I don't remember. An extension of the all-encompassing Dragon Ball fan site.
Kanzenshuu.
That's right. We cover anything and everything Dragon Ball Daima this time around. Hopes of enlightening and a little bit of entertaining. Hey, folks, it has been a minute. Boy.
So long, I forgot how to do the beginning of the podcast. Jesus Christ.
And what's so funny is, Ajay, you were only on like 2 or 3 episodes ago, but because of the span of time, it's actually been like 6 months since then. Oh, man. Let's go around the horn.
What is time?
Say who's here. I remain Mike Vegito EX. Good to be here in front of y'all again. Joining us across the pond, it's AJ. Hey.
It's me, the YouTuber who was a YouTuber and then not a YouTuber and then a YouTuber for a bit and now not a YouTuber, I guess. Yeah, I'm here. It's nice. I don't have to do anything today. Just
you
talk.
just got to talk.
Wonderful.
That's all you got to do. You're not in charge of the conversation. We'll talk about that in a minute. And Ken, hello. Welcome back.
Yes, you could say I'm across the plains, I guess, and I'm looking forward to not having to edit this podcast.
Oh, God, yes. Jesus, the editing of a podcast is the worst thing ever.
Cool. Thanks. Loving all of this support and love going around.
Have fun.
Hey, it's a super pod. Let's call it that. Maybe. I don't know. Y'all have been on the show before, but particularly with Dragon Ball Daima and how the series has gone, we've all approached reviewing the show at a different rate in different ways in different places. I'll start. I did a 2 or 3 episode intro. Heath and I are like, yay, all right, new series. Hey, things are going. Did a halfway point with Randy where we're like, yeah, having a good time. Right. Here I am at the end. Ken, let's go to you. So for We Got a Podcast, yourself, the aforementioned Randy, and Doug, y'all been doing every other episode. How's that been going?
Well, yeah, every other week we've been covering 2
Right,
episodes.
every other week, sure.
Right, yeah, we're not skipping any time.
You're skipping episodes.
Although, yeah, just the nature of how we do the podcast, it made sense to just do 2 episodes at a time. Unfortunately, it always meant we were like an episode behind the conversation of everyone else, but it's worked for us.
Yeah, and actually right now, I got you first. Y'all haven't recorded your episode 20 final episode. That's coming up in like a day or 2. You're recording that, right?
That's true, yeah. Doug doesn't know what's coming his way.
And then AJ, ahead of the game or on time with the game. I don't know. There's a phrase in there somewhere. Hey, you and Tyson and Mark have been doing every week for the last 21 weeks because we had a break in there.
Yeah. Oh, God. Why? Why did I do that? Yeah, I mean, look, it was fun to do it weekly. I think like obviously the downside of weekly is that like you just get so caught up on like the smallest things that probably don't really matter, but you know, I think it's fun to do it that way. But yeah, man, really exhausting. Because I suggested it. I was like, oh, we should do a Daima podcast. That would be really fun. Because, you know, Mark is like, you know, I don't want to do like weekly review videos on the channel because I like to make everything evergreen. Just do like a wrap up video at the end. But it would be cool to be part of the conversation and document, you know, our feelings over those weeks. But oh man, I really misjudged just how much work that is. Like showing up and talking about a show, no issue. The fact that like doing the edit is like double the time of whatever the podcast is. And man, some of those things were like 3 hours. I'm like, oh my God, why am I editing for 6 hours straight? This is hell. But it was a fun time. I don't regret it in spite of being exhausted.
I don't regret it. All right. I like that. So what have we all learned? That doing larger batches of episodes is the approach to go?
Definitely. Yeah.
Okay.
We've already talked about that. If for some reason Daima comes back for a second season, we will not be returning to cover it.
It takes a toll. Technically, I have done every week reviews. Ken, as you know, every Saturday night, for the most part, when we stream Mario Kart, we talk about the show. And that, at least for me, was a way to get some ideas out, sit with things, pitch them, see what kind of feedback I get. How's this landing? Do I feel this way the next week? So I got a little bit out of that. So I got like a little bit of the AJ approach with you on that. But hey, that's what we're doing this episode on the show. We are reviewing the entirety of Dragon Ball Daima. I've allocated whatever time I've allocated for the show. We'll see if we can keep it within that time span. If not, AJ, my apologies, because I know what time it is for you and what sleeping is like, but
it's all good. It's all good. I'll survive.
All right.
It's Dragon Ball. It energizes me. Yeah.
Cool. So what we're going to do is we'll give you a little recap of what the show is. You probably know what the show is. And then we've just got, I don't know, like a million discussion points. We could go in so many different directions. I've certainly got a list of things I would love to hit up. Ken, you scrolled through your list for me. We'll see what we hit. To Ken's point, to AJ's point in particular, it's going to be a little different from, I think, sitting with the minutia of an episode from week to week. I do want to talk about some of the larger decisions, the ramifications of those, how that fit together to tell a complete, comprehensive show, if it did, which may be a question. So hopefully, I think between totally not a pod, but actually a pod, we got a podcast and Kanzenshuu here. I think you got all the analysis you can eat. Let's get into it, folks. Here we go. Dragon Ball Daima. Man. All right, AJ, I'm going to stick with you for a second here. All new series, originally codenamed Dragon Ball Magic, envisioned as a web online series. Toriyama later came to it early mid-production, as he did with things like Battle of Gods, became more involved, more so than he intended to. Eventually ended up on broadcast TV in a new time slot late on Friday nights in Japan, but also streaming worldwide. Is there anything else you would say that's like critical to understanding the conception of Dragon Ball Daima there?
I think that probably about covers it. Yeah. I mean, I think, we've obviously spent so much time over the years hearing, Toriyama's so involved in this thing. And I think it's kind of started to just feel like a marketing point. Like it has less meaning as the years go by. And I think it was refreshing to, hear firsthand from people on the show that like this time, not just a marketing point, very much involved, just designs for everything, looking at the character sheets, overhauling character sheets, looking at animation cuts, requesting, changes and retakes and all these kind of different things, like very much in the weeds of it, which, is exciting. I mean, the production of the show is strange in that, we obviously had the comment from Akio Ioku the other week about how, they kind of just started production as production before it was being finished written. And things just kind of being very odd in that sense. I'm sure we'll get to that. But as far as Toriyama involvement goes, very, very much in there.
Ken, rebuttal?
Sure doesn't feel it at times. I think, obviously, Toriyama did contribute a great deal, especially in character designs. But I do think at points it feels like they're overusing what he gave, like particularly in episode 10, where we get the stuff about, the whole backstory that Shin gives of the universe. And it's just like a character design of Raimus just there on the screen for no reason. And so maybe this was something he contributed and then it was adapted into the script in a way that maybe wasn't necessarily intended to be. I don't know. I don't have any doubts that Toriyama was deeply involved with this. It's just to what extent really was... Watching the show as a battle between Toriyama, Nakatsuru, Ayakomaki, and everyone's favorite Yuko Kakihara. And like, at what point do we place blame or favor, I guess? Yeah. Who do we give the flowers?
Right. All right, so let's mention some of those names there. Character designs from one of the legends of Dragon Ball, Katsuyoshi Nakatsuru, animator, artist, character designer from across the span of the franchise, particularly with Dragon Ball GT, which is relevant here to Daima as we get to it. We had script for individual episodes and series composition from Yuko Kakihara. We've talked about Kakihara as it relates to things like Digimon and some products there. What was the other name that was thrown in the mix there, Ken?
Aya Kamaki and Yoshitaka Yashima, series directors.
Okay. Probably another name worth mentioning, music by Kosuke Yamashita. I do want to talk about music at some point.
Yeah.
So this is really the staff, other than, of course, all of the individual animators we have on the series. We can talk about some highlights there. But this is what we got as a production from these folks. Ran for 20 episodes from October to March. We had a single week's break there between episodes 12 and 13. That just seems so funny to me, thinking in light of coming back to 13 for the hamsters. I think back to my syndication days of coming back from a break to Bulma and the Crab. There's just a parallel there in history, I think is worth noting. That's the series we got, folks. I want to talk about so many different things. I don't want to beat a dead horse, but let's talk real quickly again about the promotion of the show, how it was long, drawn out. We had these bouts of just like radio silence in there. And then it felt like all of a sudden, here we were. The show was on the air. I've mentioned this a couple times, no magazine promotion whatsoever. So we didn't get episode listings and previews in Animedia. Unlike any other series before, we had, other than stuff that had come out online, we had no idea of where the show was going, what the story was going to be, episode titles, anything like that. That felt very different. How did that color your view of the show, if it did at all, Ken?
Man, so remember when they first announced this and there was that one joker on his phone shouting who asked for this? Man, I really hate to kind of be with him.
You don't want to vindicate that guy. No.
I don't want to give him any attention, so I don't even remember his name. But that kind of feeling never left me the whole way. Obviously, people know this. I'm a huge Moro stan. I love that arc. And I'd love to see it animated someday. Who knows if we ever will. But Daima, even from the get-go, felt like, what is this? And then they wouldn't tell us anything for the longest time. It's like, what are they hiding? Yeah. I don't feel that way anymore, but at the time, that's definitely what it felt to me, and I just had a hard time grasping why of it all along.
AJ, as someone who's been in it and had obviously seen some stuff and knew how long this thing had been in production, did that give you any pause or curiosity or anything along the way?
Yeah, the marketing for it was very strange. It's hard to even like touch on the marketing of it because there was almost nothing. Us on the Totally Not Mark channel spoke to Miles, who used to work for Crunchyroll and now runs an analytics company. He basically said that they almost like had no faith in it, kind of left it to die in a way, and that they never really stopped approaching it like a web show. It was always considered, TV, fine, whatever, but this big international web rollout is what we care about. And they pushed it to all of these different platforms, big stuff. But like one of the, I guess, failings, as he identified, is that, when you push it to everywhere, you then lose the ability to have these places promote it. There's no incentive for, Netflix to go, oh, hey, we've got Daima, except it's not exclusive and we're also a week behind. Or Amazon, who can't go like, hey, this is exclusive to us. There's no reason for them to push it. And so like it was available everywhere, but nobody had incentive to really market it. And at the same time, he also felt that like, just based on surveying people, that just as a concept, it's almost like an amalgamation of all of the least popular Dragon Ball things. It's pulling from, the OG series, which, heartbreaking as it is to say, is not as popular as when they were adults. It's pulling from GT, one of the most maligned things in the Dragon Ball franchise's history. It had a lot of things going against it, and it sort of felt like they kind of knew that and rolled with it anyway, which is odd. I think going into it, I had the premise early and knew about its production. It was still, I think, much like you guys, just a big question mark. Like, what will this be? And that didn't really change until it started to come out. I'm like, okay, I think I kind of see what we're going for here. It's kind of pushing for like a sort of Dragon Ball JRPG vibe, fun adventure stuff, leading into, bigger stories. Yeah.
Do you think sending it out to die effectively is intentional retaliation against Akio Ioku?
It's a great question. Couldn't tell you, but yeah, it's that whole rights thing is very difficult to really understand. I mean, I know that, obviously Ioku was quite heavily involved in this. I think when it came to animators having to do retakes throughout the series, they were always talking about how their scenes would get sent to not just Shueisha, but also Capsule Corporation Tokyo. And it was between both of them that would be like, yes, we like this scene, or no, this isn't quite what we wanted, please redo it. It was always going back to them, which was also a very unusual step for them as well. It's not often that, you're sending your work off to, the big higher ups on a scene by scene basis for approval. That's fairly unusual. So yeah, who knows? It's such a spaghetti thing behind the scenes. It's hard to really say.
You almost make it sound Marvel-esque in the way that you hear about these MCU movies who go through constant reshoots all the way through. Like the new Daredevil show just came out.
Where we are right now.
They started filming that, like 3-4 years ago. There's an actor in it who's died. And you're making it sound like a worst case scenario in terms of production on a series.
Yeah, it's certainly strange.
The last thing I kind of want to chat about as it relates to that, and is something Heath and I talked about a couple episodes ago, which is now several months ago, but just even things like, hey, we didn't have eye catches right away, and then sometimes we don't have eye catches, and sometimes we have title cards, and sometimes we don't have title cards. I don't really know what to do with that. I don't know if it matters, but it just felt like that's not how Dragon Ball does it.
Yeah, it's very different. It felt very much like they abandoned traditional Dragon Ball and were like, we're just going to do this like any late night TV series. Like you see a lot of anime now where it's like, oh, we're going to forgo an opening for this and we're going to roll credits over like the final scene of something. And maybe this episode will have an eye catch and this won't. I mean, early days I was like, is this because they started with a web format with no time constraints, and then they like had to chop and change and edit stuff to make it fit the TV slot? I feel like that maybe wasn't the case actually, and I think they really did just kind of play it by ear like a traditional late night anime.
As we were going through the show weekly, one of the things you would hear the most, and I'm sure we even remarked on this ourselves, was that the show has pacing issues when viewed week to week. Well, yesterday, Randy and I made the fun decision to sit down in one sitting and watch all of Daima. Took us 8 hours. We took bathroom breaks to grab food and whatnot, but a continuous 8-hour Discord call of watching Daima together. And watching it that way really opened my eyes to how the show should be watched. Like those first 8 episodes, when you watch them all in one go, the pacing issues just disappear. And so, early on, there was talk about this, being the net anime and everything. And it just felt like this was a show meant to all come out all at once and just to be binged straight through.
That's curious in particular, too, because we know that a couple of V-Jump issues ago, they said that the first part of the Daima DLC is going to be the first 8 episodes. So it really just feels like that's a part of the show.
Yeah. I mean, I can speak to that a little bit.
Okay.
When they were first putting together the show, they put together a small 2.5-minute pilot that was like a proof of concept, and that encompassed the content of those first 8 episodes. So I think it was very much designed as like that is a chunk of story.
That was the most fully realized stuff too then, because, well, as we heard, that they were still writing the ending to the show as they were working on the show. So, all right, we could spend so much time talking about that. I do want to talk about the show itself, because at the end of the day, none of that really matters, because what's on screen is what you have to watch and what you have to reflect on. So where I want to start is really just the raw underlying story. We have a post-Boo arc following very closely after that. We're heading to the Demon Realm, a place we've heard about. We actually had a character that was from there. This Dauber guy is from this place. Hey, we're going there. In particular, I want to get your reactions to the conceit for this even happening in the first place, which is Goma's basically fooled into invading, and therefore that leads to a reverse invasion of the Demon Realm. We're going to do the GT thing, like good ideas, bad execution. Like it's a cliche for a reason, but there were all these pieces, like including the setup for the show, that just sound great to me. And I even like in theory and mostly in practice, but then I needed more. So let's just talk about the rough story of the show. So we got a post-Boo arc, we're doing Demon Realm, we're meeting new characters. What worked in there? What didn't work for you in there?
I don't think we needed to be kids again, truthfully.
Yeah.
There was a part towards the end, spoilers for if anyone hasn't watched Daima.
You have to watch.
They get turned back into adults at the very end. And immediately, the second I heard Nozawa doing her lower register, when I heard Horikawa and Furukawa all come back in, the show no longer felt as alien to me as it did with new actors, even though I have nothing but praise for the new cast for their kid forms.
Feel the exact same way. In particular with Piccolo, who's a nothing character. We have to talk about that at some point. But the instant we do hear everyone again there, I agreed. It almost felt like, are we back in Super? But I don't know if that's just the recency bias of that existing that way, particularly with Piccolo, I guess, because from Superhero. But yeah, AJ, how about you? Just the rough idea for the story. What worked, what didn't work for you there? Ken mentioned the kids. What else?
Yeah, I didn't so much mind them being turned into kids. And I think that's actually because of the voice acting praise that you've just given. It felt very natural. There were very few people where I was like, oh, this is a bit weird and uncanny. They sort of felt like the characters to me. So that wasn't so much an issue for me. I think the broad issues I have, I should preface this by saying I quite enjoyed Daima. It was a fun time for me. I think good ideas, questionable execution is valid. And yeah, I think going into the show, I was like, oh, I think this could be really exciting to do this big kind of adventure story that we've not quite seen in Dragon Ball. Obviously, early Dragon Ball kind of has that going on with some of the Pilaf stuff where you're sort of going along, you're meeting new characters, you're bringing them into your party and like having micro stories along the way. It kind of exists there, but it's not quite in the same way as this very traditional RPG thing that they seem to be going for. I think what I enjoyed the broad strokes of it. I think when it comes to how some of that stuff is stitched together is where I found a lot of issues, particularly early on where we were going along and we were going to these new places and we were pulling in characters. It sort of felt like we were maybe going a bit too fast. And that when we pulled people in, a lot of that stuff wasn't woven into the narrative. So, I can give an example of this. For example, when we roll up to the third Tamagami, we're obviously in this village and we get this little story about how, there was a person who tried to do it and they died and they had a gun. Blah, blah, blah. I feel like in a better written series and even in Toriyama's own work, you would have reached there and befriended someone, kind of like Snow in the Red Ribbon stuff, and had a kind of story there, a character brought into the fold that created a kind of micro story that then made that area more interesting and more real and had more of brought the motivation of the demon realm, how people feel within that demon realm, into the story that the main characters are engrossed in. I think it was that element that was missing for me, if that makes sense. Like it
does, yeah.
Yeah, like I just couldn't help but think to all of these incredible RPGs I've played where the structure is like, oh, you go to a village and they've got stuff going on here and you learn something here and you bring a character into the fold and they've got their own story and that's then weaving into these other things, and that's not quite there. And so for a lot of the series I kind of battled with, is that Dragon Ball enough? Is it I don't know. Is it fine? Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to say, but as much as I enjoyed it, there's definitely a part of me that will always be like, oh, I feel like they maybe could have gone a little bit deeper here and really sort of nailed down some of that connective tissue.
Yeah. Pansy had already been introduced and was the shopkeep intended to be that, oh, we've made a connection. The other weird thing I feel about that scene, that episode was, okay, we're at the Tamagami. Let's talk to him. Okay, well, hold on. We're going to go eat first, and then we're going to just weird things like that. I feel like I could go a million different directions here. I'm kind of shocked by your reaction to you felt like we were going a little too fast here, because this is the point of the series where they luxuriate in locations for extended periods of time, where we got these slow zooms in on the bar, and the towers and all these other places. And for me at that point, I'm like, I'm into this, but that was also the first hints for me of like, hey, this point in the series, like, where are we going? Like, what's going to happen? Where are we going next? What's the drive beyond just seeing the locales here?
Yeah, just to clarify, like when I say going too fast, I don't mean in terms of pacing. I 100% felt that this show made abysmal use of its time.
I guess I get what you mean then. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
There was like a moment where I was like, oh my God, we've like gone as many hours of the entire Lord of the Rings trilogy and done kind of nothing.
Yeah.
Whereas it felt like for me, we were pulling in these characters, but we were doing it without, the story that should have been there. If that makes sense. That's probably a better way of putting it.
I do feel like that all melts away when you watch it in binge.
Yeah.
I think the first 8 episodes are greatly enhanced. And even if the fact that I were to recommend Daima to someone, I would say take great care to watch those first 8 episodes in kind of one go. I think 9 through 14, you could go either way. And then 15 through 20, I kind of think are, upon rewatch, kind of an unmitigated disaster. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if there's any helping those. But I think it does, and this is a total 180 of how I felt watching this week to week, is that those first 8 episodes are like borderline incredible when you watch them all in one go.
So what I'm curious to hear about from your rewatch yesterday is that's the era of the show too. We were really complaining, like, show us Goma again. What is Goma up to? Where is Degasu? Give us a little bit more. We've gotten a phone call to Arinsu. Did you still feel that way? Like you needed a little bit more with those characters? Because this is definitely the 0 B plot portion of the show.
When we did get to the point where we finally saw Goma and Degasu, I think I said to Randy, like, oh yeah, they're in this show.
Yeah.
But here's the thing where, Mike, you said you knew what I was going to say on this podcast, and where I have to come in and say, I am coming out of the final few episodes of Daima, the first go around, and this rewatch, actually liking Glorio. And it's because I know when you watch
you were the number one Glorio hater.
Yeah. Well, in the way that they chose to express these episodes to me on a weekly basis, he's trash. You forget about all the little things from episode to episode because there's all these other Goku-focused things that you're locking in on. But when you're watching it all in one go, you remember the tiny little smirk Goma has, or Glorio has here, or the little nod he has here. And it all builds up so that when you do get to that moment at the end where he has all those flashbacks to the Sky Seed and whatnot, that it does actually end up feeling earned, which is why it's so now ingrained in my soul to think of this as a show that was not ever meant to come out weekly until the very end.
I remember there being a bit of a hubbub when Glorio and Pansy had the fist bump. It sounds like it does work on repeated viewing.
I think so. I do truly implore anyone who thought Glorio was nothing but a wet fart to go back, watch the whole series binge. You don't have to do it all in one sitting like I did, but you will feel it more at the end with Glorio watching it that way.
Some other things I want to get into here, particularly because I just re-listened to the podcast I did with Heath and then the midway review I did with Randy. Ken, I've listened to all the We Got a Podcast episodes about it. AJ, I've listened to all of your podcasts with Tyson and Mark about it. So I feel like I roughly know how you all have felt on first viewing. So where I want to go there is what I felt in myself and heard in myself, and even with Randy, particularly with Randy over the last few weeks, was that early engagement and energy once the series did start and how invigorated we all felt. And then this like slow decline and almost descent into madness from there. And like you can hear the breaking point in Randy in particular when he started like almost clamming up a little bit in response to some of the questions you were asking him. I felt that in myself too. The planes were part of it. And I gave the series a lot of grace along the way. And Ken, it was to your unmitigated disaster portion of the series. That's what really broke me on Daima, was just getting to that area and nothing happening and just these completely ineffectual military. And why are we even having this battle? This is not even a battle.
The show lacks any internal logic. There are episodes of the show that, you know, everyone's arguing about canon, right? GT, Super Saiyan 4, Super. There are episodes of the show that are not canon to the episode that happened 5 episodes ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
AJ, rebuttal.
Yeah, I don't really have a rebuttal. Like, you know, going week by week, I would say my perspective on it was, you know, oh, I'm really enjoying this, you know, between sort of episodes 1 to 10. I was like, yeah, I'm pretty into this. It has some issues for sure. I would have approached things differently, but, it feels like Dragon Ball in a way that Super didn't. It's not making me upset like Super. It's a decently fun time. It doesn't quite have much momentum, but it's fine. And then I felt like when the Super Saiyan 3 Vegeta episode happened up until probably episode 15, 16, when the big war stuff happened, I was really kind of down in the dumps. The only slither of hope in that section for me was the hamster episode, where I was like, this has no place being here. This is a really stupid place for this episode. But man, this is like the adventure vibes that I really wanted, and I'm now really missing from the first start of the series. Yeah, very much up and down. I know you seem to indicate you really didn't like the finale. I was pretty into the finale stuff in in a way where I'm like, I acknowledge that this is really silly and we're bringing back Super Saiyan 4 and it's all gone balls to the wall madness, but it's fun, dumb spectacle, whatever.
Now, what exactly do you mean by wasn't into the finale with someone here?
You sound like you got to the finale and went, this is a shark jumping load of bullshit. What the fuck is this?
Man, I mean, why don't we pause there to talk about Super Saiyan 3? Because that almost felt like another turning point for the show, where it was, okay, we're going to do new things, spins on old things, reintroduce, but also like very explicit fan service. I'm really stealing this from a whole bunch of different people. This is not an original thought, but Vegeta having Super Saiyan 3, whatever, if you're going to do it, great. But it takes away from, okay, well then Goku does it, and then they pause and they do a slow zoom in on Goku. Like, oh man, okay, here's Super Saiyan 3. But we just had it. And there would be back-to-back instances of it. And therefore, it just didn't do anything for me. Like, I couldn't be excited about the fact that he showcased, I don't know. I kind of don't know where I'm going with that. Someone help me out.
The problem lies in Goma and his third eye form, is that there is never really any point where they've ever been overpowered by him. Yeah. They are stronger than him at every point. And it is just that he is full of stamina. It's like Android 18 versus Vegeta all over again. And so that makes that uninteresting. And I'm not a power scaler. I'm not going to get involved in these types of arguments, but I liked Super Saiyan 3. I like Vegeta using it. I like that he uses it differently than Goku.
Sure. Yeah.
He's much more controlled movements. Goku's much more wild with it and expending his energy. But I think the problem doesn't lie with them using it. It lies with the entire last few episodes of Goma. And it's just them repeating the beat of, we'll overpower him again. Oh, it's not working. And then they just keep. And so you get into this crazy loop with him. And so I don't know if maybe your complaint is with Super Saiyan 3 or with actually how just everything unfolds with Goma there.
For me, it's even before. It's during the Tamagami fight with 3. And then we also got little Goku as Super Saiyan 3 after that. So it's like, okay, well, then what was the point of showing Vegeta in it if Goku's going to do 2? We already know Goku. I don't know. It just didn't feel. We'll talk about this with Super Saiyan 4, but like the narrative purpose for a transformation. 3 is also unique in that respect too, in that the character just has it, even back in the original series. Like, oh, I trained for it, and because afterlife, okay, energy kind of thing, you kind of buy it. But especially where we've come, Ken, from Super and the Super manga, and Goku and Vegeta going different paths for transformations and the purposes of them. But I guess this is before that, even if it's not in the continuity of it. Man, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, look, I am a self-proclaimed Vegeta fanboy. I should have been screaming, oh my god, he finally got Super Saiyan 3 and it looks different and it's so cool. And it felt very flat for me. Not even just from like a narrative perspective. I don't think there's anything wrong with him like busting that out to take down, I guess, the second boss of the story.
Yeah.
But I think for me, it was more just like a production thing of like, this isn't actually directed very well. How do you do Super Saiyan 3 Vegeta debut and not make me very excited? I think part of that is also the music in the series that I know is a whole topic we'll get to. But yeah, I just found that to be a slight misstep, which then, when it is pulled out later, I thought, I enjoyed it when Vegeta was an adult, it was well directed then. But at that point, you've kind of blown your load early and not very spectacularly. Doing it again, it's cool looking, not as exciting.
Two things in there for Vegeta versus the Tamagami. To Ken's point, yes, I really enjoyed the arms crossed and just like the overhead clocks and just standing there. That was cool. I get it. And so I think that did some of the heavy lifting in backing up what there wasn't in terms of storyboarding animation in there. That was helpful. But it was definitely around that point too, where I was like, hey, there's no music playing for a long period of time in these scenes. And that was surprisingly notable because of how low and distant and ineffectual the music is. So I guess let's talk about the music for a little bit, just coming off of the scene this episode. What a disappointment.
This is another thing that didn't make anything better on rewatch, but on rewatch, you do realize just how many tracks there are in this show. I don't think there are 70 like they say there are going to be. I don't know what's going on with that. But as far as, yes, we do have those like 4 or 5 tracks that keep getting used over and over and over in this show. But there are actually a lot more tracks. So I think AJ, correct me if I'm wrong, it's the director who places the music in the episodes?
Yeah, kind of. So it's a collaboration. There's like a specific music selector role who will kind of be like, and here are some tracks that will probably be right for this part. And the director will be like, yes, that one. And yeah.
So I think probably the issue lies with them and not necessarily Yamashita, the composer, so much, is that the tracks are there. They just weren't using them.
AJ, I think y'all talked about this too, but just how low the music is mixed in the series.
Yeah. Tyson has, been very vocal about this, that like, Dragon Ball has always been a very music first kind of show. It's mixed extremely loudly from the original series where it's so loud to Super where like it's a bit less loud, but it's still right there. Whereas in Daima, it's super quiet. Like it doesn't have any kind of oomph. When it kicks in, there's no volume to it. And I've been wondering why this might be the case. I have one crackpot theory that may age terribly, but we've seen that Daima is getting a 4K release coming up. At the same time, One Piece is currently airing its Fishman Island remaster, and one of the big selling points of that is that it has a Dolby Atmos mix, multi-channel, surround sound. I believe Superhero was also the same. I'm curious as to whether Daima was mixed for multi-channel, and that's what we might get on the Blu-ray, in which case I wonder if maybe the mix was iffy on streaming and TV because it is a multi-channel mix being mixed down to stereo in a way that wasn't great.
Yeah.
That's a crackpot theory that may age terribly, but that's really the only thing I can think of.
Interesting. Hey, can we pause on the home video release for a second too? Because AJ, I'd like you to answer this on the record. So yeah, we're getting a DVD release. I can't imagine anyone's going to buy a DVD of this modern series. We're getting a standard Blu-ray release as well. Great. Okay. The collector's edition, limited edition version of it comes with the regular Blu-ray, but it does also come with 4K Ultra HD Blu-ray, which they specifically note is an upscale. So AJ, Daima is not produced to 4K.
No, Daima is produced at 1080p. I think the benefits we'll see on the Blu-ray will just be obviously the wider color space, the improved chroma resolution, which in layman's terms, I guess like if you look at the reds in a lot of standard definition or even HD stuff can look a little bit funky. The red colors will not look as shit. It's basically the simplest way of putting that. We'll see. It might be okay. In Superhero's case, that was also another upscale, and it was fine. It offered benefits, so I don't think it's quite $350 worth of benefits, but I'm glad it exists.
Can't miss them. They're green. Let's kind of get back to the flow of the show a little bit. Ken, again, I'm thinking a lot to your breakdown of the show into those different parts. Midway through is where it really feels like they figure out how to do multiple things at once. In particular, we have 2 different Tamagami fights happening at the same time. This is where I kind of went back up on my upswing of enjoyment of the show. Like, all right, they figured it out. This is also the point, though, where we have really great new characters. We've already been introduced to Hibis at this point, and every time he's on screen, he's just an absolute angel. But now we have Ku, and then we get Do as well. And they do a lot of heavy lifting in Daima every time they're on screen. We have incredible voice performances, really great action direction from them. I would die for Ku.
I have nothing bad to say about Ku or Do. I think they are just an absolute delight, and I want them to become, in terms of Dragon Ball usage, like what we got from Beerus and Whis before they overstayed their welcome.
Yeah.
I just love Ku and Do, and I want them in everything.
Yeah, they're so good. All of these new characters slot so perfectly within the Dragon Ball world. Hibis, as you said, I have never connected to a character just so strongly. He's just so unbothered about everything. And yeah, Ku and Do are so much fun. They're such an interesting pair in that, like, they exclusively work as a pair. The way they bounce off of each other is just wonderful. And Arinsu just sort of being this weird, like, wrangler, babysitter, these two hilarious little margin, just great.
And that speaks to Toriyama. He's said this multiple times. Yeah, I introduce characters in pairs, usually so they can do exposition off of each other. But in this case, it's less exposition and more just character dynamics, which is what I needed and wanted more of in the show, is character dynamics. And we got them out of two villain ? Characters. I think they're actually so great that you overlook what little they do or have or importance. Even scenes of them just sleeping on the couch next to Arinsu, I'm like, oh yeah, great, there's Ku and Do. That's actually a terrible scene because we need to know what's going on with Arinsu. She's like, we've got nothing of what her plot is, and then we get to the end of the series like, oh, is she bad? No, she's not bad. Okay, great, all right, everyone's cool here. We never really got anything out of her. Like, this woman is sucking the life force out of people. We're aware of a previous Majin that's been created. I don't know, do we want to get into the guns that never fired?
I have a whole section here called Chekhov's blanks, and when you're ready, we can dive into it.
God, I think I want to do that now, because let's come off the positive of Ku and Do, and whether it's Katats, the fusion bugs, the Majin, the gun that was used against Tamagami, run me down the list.
So these are going to vary in level of importance. So the first one is Kaioshin freaking out about the pin used to send Kibito, because they spend a lot of time focusing on that being an issue, only to wash it away with Hibis later.
Yeah.
That one is really low importance. We spend a lot of time worrying about the Sea of Darkness in the third Demon World, which they don't do anything with, and we don't really even know what it is yet. Of course, probably the biggest one for everyone is these fusion bugs, which they really do take a lot of time to show, explain, and then show that Goku has them.
We get an illustration of how it works, which confused everyone for a while that didn't read them explicitly telling you that it was two people. But yeah, that's poor illustration, so I guess I understand that.
We have the Life Force collection, which seemed like it was going to be used for Goma's promise to give Neba 1,000 years of life back.
Yeah.
When Neba's possibly millions and millions of years old, but who knows? Every Majin can use at least one magic spell. We see Pansy use her telekinesis, which is actually number 6 on this list.
Okay.
We see Glorio use his. We kind of imply what Arinsu's is in terms of her and that giant hookah that she's riding.
Yeah.
We've got the Wolfman, and I think that's about it. We see Degasu kind of like do like a magic code thing to unlock when he shuts down the Warp Sama. Goma, we don't, like, what is his thing? Everything
Tornadoes?
that we see in the intro, everything we see him use with his rod is when he's in his third eye form. So really, we don't know what he can do. But we have an entire military police force that are considered Majin, right? Oh yeah, and then the Ginyu Force leader, he can use the fireball. We haven't even gotten to them yet.
Ken, I forgot they existed.
What is the point of bringing up that this is a magical wonderland, and we have like 5 or 6 characters actually using the magic that were promised that all Majin have? AJ, rebuttal?
Don't put it on me. I don't have much of a rebuttal. I mean, the only thing I would probably take issue from that list is the pin thing, where they were concerned about the pin, but the pin was thrown out the window because Hybis solved that for them, I guess, is one.
That's very
yeah, I guess, I don't know. I never really thought about magic usage in that sense. I suppose I don't view that as like a unfire Chekhov's gun. I'm more just like, you know, the series was originally called Dragon Ball Magic. Yeah. We could have done some more magic here, but, you know, that's, for me, that's, you know, kind of whatever. Yeah, I don't really have many rebuttals. I think one of those things with Daima is that I think much like I look at many parts of the original series too, I see a lot of stuff. I'm like, that's not quite right, or this isn't quite right. But I'm kind of going on vibes, and you know, a lot of vibes were chill for me. They were enjoyable enough, as frustrating as the show could be.
There's the scene where Goma is planning to use Dende to make new Dragon Balls, which kind of never gets talked about again. I mean, we see Degasu carrying Dende for some reason. It's not explicit that he's going to run away at that point, because he's up there for a while. And then, of course, Mike, to bring it back to Arinsu's first Majin. Her exact quote is, "This had better work this time. The last Majin couldn't even beat me." I was thinking that was going to be Glorio.
We all kind of thought that, and then it ended up being just a street rat she saved.
Yeah. Like I said, this list here, and I'm now done with it, is in varying levels of importance to me. Obviously, the pin thing being the lowest, the fusion bugs probably being the highest. But the show just felt like it was bringing up stuff in a very sloppy way. When I think back to the original series, the only thing off the top of my head that I can think back on that Toriyama just brought up and it was never touched on in the manga was the Rito people. I'm sure there might have been more instances, but that's really the only one at the top of my mind. And then, of course, they were in the anime. But this just felt like it was talking about a lot of stuff of no import to the story. Like, why bring up... It comes back to Rimus. They show him a PNG of him on the screen, and then they move on, and he's never talked about again.
Yeah, that's definitely the most egregious. I think, you know, when it comes to stuff like, you know, Ernsu's first Majin or whatever, I'm like, whatever, like, the backstory, that's fine. She did a thing before it failed, and that's why she's trying to do it again. That stuff doesn't bother me. I do agree that a lot of the series, early days, it's like, part A of this episode is just character talks about lore, and that lore is not important to anything, really. And the Limus Rimus stuff is definitely like the most egregious aspect of that. And I think that specifically is what ties back into me thinking that the show doesn't make very good use of its time. It's almost like you could do like a Dragon Ball Daima Kai, a Dragon Ball Kaima, and cut so much of this stuff out and create a pretty tight series, I think.
I've thought about doing that myself, but I cannot bring myself to do that. just as, you know, an educational experience for myself to see how I would mix some of that stuff. Because I think about like, let me take some of the later scenes of Goma and Degasu and just put them earlier, because why the heck not? There's other stuff. I want to get back to maybe one of Ken's lists, which is lore related things, but I want to pause and go back to characters a little bit there. Ku, Do, great. Arinsu, I really wish some more stuff was fleshed out there. Can we talk about Degasu a little bit and how just fucking nothing that character ended up being?
Yeah, what is there to say?
Yeah. I definitely think it's so valid to look at Gomar and Degasu and just be like, why? They were in a room for 17 episodes other than the tiny bit at the start. Yeah, really weirdly underbaked for what is supposed to be the big final boss. They had no real like secondary action of their own. Like, I feel like if you're going to set up a big bad, much like I was talking about, you know, micro narratives feeding into the protagonist storylines, you kind of have to have the bad guy working in the background doing something meaningful of their own, having their own goals that they're trying to achieve. And that never seemed to really happen. They were kind of like, they're doing this thing. I'm looking at you through my magic iPad. Let me try and send the not Guinea Force maybe, and to close the portal, do something like, just okay. That's not very meaningful.
I'm actually okay with Goma in all this because, like I said early on, he almost got tricked into having this thrust upon him. And so him being very inept about all of it the whole time, kind of okay. Separate conversation about what the third eye brought to him in the end. But when we did have Goma moments, they were all really funny. But Degasu added nothing to any of it. Anytime that they could have done something with him, where there was one scene in particular where he seemed like he was taking some kind of covert phone call, but it turns out, oh, he's just talking to the military and arranging that. And then it didn't end up being Degasu with the hat. What a missed opportunity for what they clearly set up. Like, I almost feel like they thought they were being clever about making us think it was Degasu presenting as this girl to go get the third eye from Hybis with the hat. And then they're like, haha, no, actually, it was just this random girl the whole time. Isn't that so clever? No, actually, it's not.
I do think there was a level of cowardice in not letting Degasu be the lady in the hat.
Uh-huh.
But on a reflection just about her real quick, I do kind of like that in all of Goma's ambitions and everything to get this third eye, that it ends up being some totally random girl who's the one who helps him put it in. Maybe that's her magic power.
That's like the third eye the whole time. Like, it's all random happenstance in its history there. So
maybe it has some like random aura around it.
Just going back to Degasu, because all roads lead to Degasu going nowhere. Between the phone call, the getting the third eye, kidnapping Dende and going for what purpose, to do what, for what reason, just to get out of here. Why did he need to bring Dende with him? What was he? And then just hearing Kaioshin be like, yeah, and them and their ambition, like, nah, dog.
Yeah, and then we get the line from, I think, Arinsu, who says that it's in our nature to be ambitious. And it's like, there's the two of you who are ambitious. The rest just kind of went off and watched planets and sat by waterfalls. But my issue, to bring it back to Goma, is that, every time we saw Goma was great. Whether he was doing something or not, he was a fun character to watch. And the second he turns into Jiren mode, he becomes boring. And that it's like he's not the same character anymore.
That's interesting. I never felt that way. I think I agree that Goma is always fun to watch. He's a very funny character. Like, he is just an endless onslaught of hilarious expressions and dumb lines. Like, his ineptitude is endlessly entertaining. I just kind of wish he would have done more. Like, I just wasn't okay with him sitting in a room for so much of the series and having no screen time. Man, there was at one point, I think we counted the number of episodes between when we first saw him and when he appeared again. And it was so many episodes. It was insane. It was like, oh my God, you just like forgot about your big bad for so long. And I think that really hurt how much I was invested in him. Like, when he turns, big Jiren mode, like I'm okay with that. He was definitely like kind of stupid and silly in places and overly arrogant. And like, I think that's fine to be, but I think that hurts more when you just don't really get any kind of like nuanced build up to that. It's like guy in a room and then boom, Jiren.
I don't know where to go with that.
Silence.
Yeah.
I have two other main directions I want to go in. And I'm sure everyone's got different stuff they want to talk about too. I hate to just be so negative about stuff because I don't get enjoyment out of it, but I would be remiss not to talk about just the raw editing of the show.
Oh, you don't love Fade to Blacks?
The two most egregious things to me, the Vegeta bar flashback, those fades to and fro. I talked about this with Randy, so it's fresh in my mind from re-listening to it. But that never escaped my memory. Again, having just watched the entire series again, there was a lot of that. It felt like early on where there'd be just random fades. Did that still stick out? And was there anything else that we didn't think of, but on reflection, you noticed?
The first weird moment in the show to me is still when Bulma is like looking aghast at the Kaioshin ship not working.
Yeah.
And then we do the rest of the show really is just the fade to blacks that I think are an editing issue. I really don't think the editing on the whole is that bad. It's just there are a few points where you wonder if the editor is experienced with Dragon Ball at all.
Yeah.
Do they understand like the flow of an episode? And not that Daima can't have its own visual or editing identity, but it's just not good.
Yeah, I mean, I can't argue with those. I mean, thankfully they are few and far between, but they are really odd. Like, putting aside anything to do with Dragon Ball and quality of direction or whatever, just from like a basic editing standpoint, really amateur. It reminds me of when, people would do like very quick cuts, like, manga accurate Dragon Ball Z edit, and like because it's so like entwined in filler, they'd put in like these awkward fades. It's like, what are you doing? This doesn't work. I think other than the like Vegeta flashback, I think the weirdest one for me was the like Ginyu attempted a Ginyu gag, where it's like, we're gonna fight now, and then like obviously the joke is meant to be hard cut to them all wrapped up and owned, but the show does like a fade. It's like that's not how comedic timing works. What are we doing?
Yeah.
Yeah. Very, very odd in that sense.
Again, I forgot about those characters entirely before coming in here. But now I'm reminded of the scene just before that, where we've got the firing and then the arm chop and then the ball goes in the wrong direction. I know I posted about this on socials, but I had to rewatch that scene several times to actually figure out what happened there. And that it was, he smacked his arm and then the fireball like went forward, but then like slowly fell backwards the whole It's just stuff like that. Is that a storyboard thing? Is that an animation thing? Is that a writing thing? Is it all of that?
Primarily storyboard. Look, I know you don't want to be negative, so we can talk about the animation after this.
Sure.
I think the animation was just like a big positive. But I would say that whenever I talk about the animation, I have to caveat it by acknowledging that the show's direction and storyboarding for a good chunk of episodes was really not great, especially in the first half where Yoshitaka Yashima storyboards like almost the entire thing. And like, he's not a bad storyboard artist, but he's very mediocre. And a good storyboard can really elevate a script into something really exciting. And I think we felt that most clearly with episode 13 with the hamsters and the giants, where like that, on paper, not that interesting. We're dealing with some hamsters and there's some giants and none of this ties into the plot in any way. But the way that it's boarded, the way that it's executed makes that great. There's a great sense of wonder and, even an attempt at eliciting emotion. Doesn't really exist for a lot of the series. And I think that definitely comes across in the clarity of certain scenes, that example being one of them. Very questionable storyboard artist for that. Thankfully, they only did 2 episodes of the series, but yeah, very, very odd.
Ken, don't let me forget, Akio Otsuka is going to be the one thing I want to come back to. But while we're talking about hamsters, AJ, this is something I do hope you can say a little bit about, but it's a weird placement for the episode because we just came off of Super Saiyan 3 Vegeta, and it just feels like the series comes to a screeching halt. I'm with you. I think it's a fun episode. I think it's beautiful. I like all the moment-to-moment things in it. We get the mention of Magellite, which sort of comes around in the end again, so I guess you can't remove it entirely. It's a weird placement, but AJ, like, that had been conceived of years ago. Like, it's not like they decided they wanted to bring it to a halt. Like, that was the plan for the series there, right?
Yeah. I do not understand the structure of this show. It's very, very odd. It's such a bizarre place for it. It's the kind of thing that feels like it belongs when they first go into the second demon world. It's like, we get an episode here that like defines how different this is to the rest of it. Whereas now it functions where they go in there and it's a bunch of ocean, and then they do the Tamagami thing, and then we get to learn a little bit about the second demon world. It's very odd. It almost feels like, again, to talk about how stuff should tie to other things, it almost feels like they should have gone into that giant land, and not to get all fanficky here, but like have them have some kind of connection to the Tamagami in a way. Like that immediately makes it a little bit more interesting. Have them have some reason to care about the Dragon Balls. they managed to make us care about the freedom of World 3.
Yeah.
But World 2, not so much. They were kind of just vibing. That had no real relevance to the savior of the demon realm, you know? So I would say that's definitely odd. I have no explanation for it. I wish I did. Again, the structure of the show completely eludes me.
All right, we will talk about animation, but the one last weird editing decision came out of nowhere. Boy, Akio Otsuka comes in with bespoke narration for a flashback.
Oh my God.
Which it's so strange because like we have our new regular narrator, Oolong's voice actor, has taken over as a narrator from Joji Yanami. And we have had narration at points because he was credited. But yeah, this is like its own new separate thing. So I know for at least you and I were like, oh yeah, there's our boy. I actually didn't realize this. I think Julie pointed it out on the forum. Otsuka is the son of a prior Otsuka who's Talpai's voice actor.
Oh,
so
really?
It's in the family now, which is super cool. Weird scene though. Just the setup for it. Like all the individual things about it make sense, but just the way that it was presented and with a different narrator. Like, is Otsuka supposed to be Abra, like telling the story?
Otsuka sounds so much like Kadan's voice actor.
Yeah. I thought Kadan was Otsuka at first.
Right, yeah, same. And at first blush, I just thought it was Kadan doing the narration, which I guess would have been all right to fit there. It's interesting. You know, I like Akio Otsuka. You know, obviously he's the Japanese voice of Snake in the Metal Gear games. He is the voice of Adachi in Yakuza Like a Dragon and Infinite Wealth. So I'm familiar with his work to a certain degree, and I like him a lot. So I wasn't really focusing too much on that. You know, we touched a little bit on lore in this show, and I was more focused on, you're showing me all of these great demon kings that we've had, and obviously they have very distinct designs, but you've darkened all of them. And so people are having to go in and move the levels around so they can see. It's like, I just want to see this. You're world building here, but you're hiding it from me. Yeah. So that's what bothered me about that flashback.
Yeah, that flashback is just baffling. It's funny because in the storyboard for that segment, all of those characters are just black blobs. They have no shape to them at all. So yeah, I think that might have just been a case of like, you know, hey, do what you want here. And they did, rather than it being like a carefully considered thing. I think the reason that flashback felt so weird to me is it felt like it was suddenly One Piece. It was like, this is not how Dragon Ball works. What? And its placement is so weird. Like, that's the kind of thing that feels like it belongs at the start of an episode early days, rather than like, oh, we're doing a thing and boom, narrated flashback. Am I wrong in thinking that that's a first for Dragon Ball? That seemed so weird to me.
Insofar as, so like with Trunks, we had that moment where he would flash back to walking through a devastated future, and there's that song that plays.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah, mind power. Come on, man.
Yeah. So we've had moments like that, but yes, in the manga, I don't think there is ever a single flashback outside of Frieza recognizing Bardock as looking like
Goku. In the manga, I'd have to think about that. In the anime, there's at least 3 different explanations of, or showcases of, Piccolo Daimao splitting from the original version of that character. And some of them are narrated, some of them are not. So like there are times where we see flashbacks, sure.
There's one in the manga when Kami is talking to Popo about coming to Earth.
Yes. So we see the little guy sitting on the mountain, right?
Which is a flashback within a flashback, I think.
Right. Okay, so maybe there's... But yeah, AJ, I'm with you. Just like the framing and production style of that flashback in that episode feels to me in line with some of the complaints we'll see about Toyotaro and the way that he'll frame things that feel more One Piece or Naruto style in the Dragon Ball Super manga. I mean, think of the granola arc, and we had multiple chapters that were themselves not in the present day chronology. They were just flashbacks. Is this just these people are not Toriyama's contemporaries, and this is just the style that they've grown accustomed to / like?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess it must be a Kakihara thing, right?
And is that okay? Because it's a new series, new audience, new visual identity. It doesn't have to be like the old series. I don't know. I'm not saying I want that, but I can see someone arguing for that.
Yeah, so I think that's where I have to like clarify that I have no issue with like flashbacks. And as you pointed out, there are flashbacks in Dragon Ball. But to me, it was the presentation and placement of it that felt very anti-Dragon Ball. I think there are ways of doing it in ways that I can't quantify on the fly on podcasts like this.
I know.
But just again, I'm so much about the vibes when it comes to this show.
Okay, so let's vibe a little bit. Let's talk about animation and us vibing out.
I'm saying the vibes were off for the flashback, to be clear. That is not an excuse for the flashback. The vibes were off there.
Okay. So we get maybe our first hints of where the animation can be in the series with lightning. And then, of course, we get the fight against Tamagami number 3, which is just a visual tour de force. I still think there's some weird oddities in there. I'm not convinced that's actually Super Saiyan 2. I'm not necessarily willing to go fight about that, but watching it twice, it didn't connect with me that way. Especially because of the way we see Super Saiyan 2 hair drawn at the end of the series. I don't know. Watching Ken's face.
It's 2, Mike. It's 2. Come on.
I don't know. And then we kind of just go from there, but up and down. So we already talked about Vegeta Super Saiyan 3, where like, hey, what happened there? We were maybe expecting more. We get some really great choreography, in particular with Do when he's fighting Tamagami. And then it all leads up towards the end of the series where it's almost all animation and no substance anywhere underneath it. AJ, where do you want to go with this?
Oh man, I could just pop off right now. The animation in this series was crazy stuff. Not in the way I think a lot of people expected.
Yeah, it wasn't what I expected.
Yeah, I think like I guess early days I thought, oh, we're going to get like, so many amazing top tier fights an episode, but like the story doesn't facilitate that.
Right.
And so it sort of felt like, okay, Vegeta was a weird miss. Obviously there are great animated moments within that, but the staff allocation for that episode felt very strange. But then I sort of look at everything else and I'm like, wow. I mean, to talk about the finale, that's basically like a 2-hour nonstop action movie. I mean, we look at stuff like Broly and we hold that up as like the pinnacle of the series. Obviously, it's well animated. Pinnacle of the series in terms of visuals. Don't give me those faces. Holy shit. I can feel the death stares coming. Oh,
no,
my
death
days.
stare. My face is in reaction to Mike's face.
Is it though, AJ? Is it though?
Sorry. In terms of pure action visuals, the craziest animation.
For the record, I like Broly.
When you look at that film in particular, like it's all condensed into 30 minutes at the end. Again, kind of similar with superhero, like it might be CG, but all the big action stuff is towards the end, and it's about 30 minutes. Daima pulling off a feature-length action scene is mental. Like, wow. That was really impressive. In terms of action animation per episode, with maybe like 1 or 2 exceptions, you had a great action scene per episode, which is nuts. And in terms of the way that I think a lot of that time was put to use, I know I spent a lot of the time early days having people go, hold on, where's all this great animation that we were promised? Of course, it does deliver on that eventually, but I think early days, a lot of that went into ensuring that basically every shot in the show looks great. I think it only started to falter in like the last couple episodes where suddenly there was some slightly iffy bits as I think the production started to wrap up and catch up. But yeah, when it came to model consistency, when it came to one aspect that most people don't pay masses of attention to, but the quality of in-betweens, you look back at Super and you start frame by framing through that stuff, and like between keyframes, terrible, just melting. That is not the case in Daima. It is phenomenally consistent in that regard. It's a really insanely well-produced show that going in, obviously, I think people were like, oh, is it going to be like, Jujutsu Kaisen Season 2 or Mob Psycho or whatever? Like, okay, no, it's not that. But I think when you look at the quality of a lot of anime that comes out nowadays that has all of these like viral action scenes, when you actually sit down and watch them, polish-wise, not great. Like, they are microcosms of greatness, whereas Daima, yeah, just really very polished, very successful, healthy stuff that, wow, did Dragon Ball deserve after Super?
Yeah, the phrase that I use is that it's the most consistently competent Dragon Ball show visually. But on that same angle, at the end of it, I'm not going to ever say that it was not... Those final 3 episodes were incredibly well animated, final 4 episodes. But after a certain point, I just start zoning out because what's happening is not interesting, even though it's beautifully animated. It's just, I felt bad because Randy and I were watching it. There were parts where I just wasn't even looking at the screen anymore. I was looking at something and it's just boring. And how great could it have been if that stuff, maybe you shorten the Goma fight a little bit, or you have a different phase of that Goma fight where he's not third eye yet. Just a misuse of resources, I still think, even though everything's beautiful.
Yeah, I can agree with that for sure. Like, I often get a reputation of only caring about flashy animation, and that can be enough to overcome everything. That's not the case in reality. Like, there are so many shows where I'm like, this is beautiful, but fuck me, is it boring. And I wouldn't say I felt that like super strongly in the finale, but I would say that, episode 20, right? First half of that is adult Super Saiyan 4 Goku wailing on Goma. A little bit less interested there. Curious to see how that feels back to back with 19, but certainly in the context of just watching 20 in isolation, I was like, I feel like we've kind of done this for 2 episodes now. I'm sort of less engaged with it, even though it is stunning.
Well, I can tell you how it feels after watching it back to back with the first 19 episodes of the show, and it's not great.
Okay.
What other, we gotta talk about Super Saiyan 4. What other highlights in terms of whether it's a drawing or an animation piece or a scene, a battle, do you reflect on as like, yeah, that really stood out to me as something spectacular from this show?
This is going to sound strange, but for parts of it, Yamamuro coming back. I think there's one face he draws on Goku when they're inside the castle. He turns back to, I think, Vegeta and Piccolo, and it looks just straight out of the Kanzenshuu era Yamamuro. And that's the one that I love. And so I know a lot of people were like, Vegeta's eye corners are too sharp.
Guilty.
Yeah, right. But for a lot of that, he was a welcome presence to have back for a little bit of that towards the end. Wasn't necessarily great all the way through, but I did like a lot of his output here.
Yeah, it was great to see him. Like, he's such a funny one. For when he started popping up in the second half of this show, I was kind of like, what is happening here? Is this like a Yamamuro redemption arc? Like, he's producing like really competent animation here. A lot of these drawings are pretty good. Sure, there are some stuff that's like extremely Dragon Ball Super that I didn't love, but like it was looking pretty good. I definitely felt like, redemption arc ended as soon as they became adults again. I was like, okay, well now we've just gone back to Super, and I don't love this much at all. But at the same time, I'm also, I think, having, I guess, grown up a bit in terms of animation knowledge, I also have like a slightly more nuanced take on him now, where I'm like, okay, I don't love your style, but I've also been privy to like what this looked like before you touched it, and not great. You saved this and you did it very quickly, efficiently, and made it look at least like Dragon Ball in ways that a lot of people can't do with such ease. And so I sort of found a newfound appreciation for him in that regard. But yeah, I mean, I can't like fault stuff like 18. Certainly there are Nakatsu corrections that bring it more in line with the show and take away some of those aspects that I don't love about his style. But a lot of it is untouched, and a lot of it looks great. I really loved how episode 18 looked. It was really, really strong.
The scene that actually stands out to me is not important, but it's Goma at his desk screaming, and his head just gets larger and larger as he's yelling. I needed more of that. That was the point where we're like, oh, great, we're seeing this character again, too. So I think that helped that. All right, we got to talk about Super Saiyan 4. I don't know what to say about it, which is the tough thing here. So Daima is in so many ways Toriyama's redo of GT. Is That's a way to phrase it for sure. If you look at it from surface level of Back to Kids and Adventures and Planets and new Dragon Balls, and we get this new transformation as well. I can't get over, and again, not an original thought. So many folks have discussed this already, including you all. Just no reason for this transformation.
In the way that it comes out, yeah, I think it's a little. They took like the worst case scenario of how to handle it. I think had it been something that Neva just gave him, and had they done anything to tie Science into the demon realm,
yeah,
I think there were a lot of cool paths they could have gone through to legitimize Super Saiyan 4 here. I don't think that they took the right road though.
In particular, because it's so transparent of we are literally pulling this existing transformation with this existing name from this existing show. And we know all of what went into getting that transformation, whether it's from pulling out the tail, which is, you know, a funny gag that ultimately leads to it, to regaining a sense of self with his granddaughter against this opponent on this planet for this reason. All of my friends have been taken over. Like, there's so much building up to what that form is and means and gets you for like the next 5 episodes. And here it's just remember Super Saiyan 4. And I can't get past that.
It's so weird to be watching Daima and then suddenly have to heap praise onto GT.
Right.
Especially, you know, I just watched through most of it, GT, for the first time just a year or so ago.
Yeah.
And so all of that is very fresh in my mind. And looking at GT's first 40 episodes, I'll say, very distinct separation here, and how much spirit of Toriyama there was. I mean, obviously he didn't work on that show, but people who were familiar with it in a contemporary fashion, right, were able to imbue that energy into the storytelling and ultimately leading up to Super Saiyan 4, that I feel like that gift that those people had is absent from Daima in trying to do the same thing.
If it were just something else entirely and not just a slightly redesigned Super Saiyan 4, I mean, it's tough to play the what ifs because then we would never know that it was going to be Super Saiyan 4 and it was something else. It just feels too obligatory and cliche to like, all right, here we are in the final moments of almost like the generic Netflix show of 10 years ago, back to Daredevil. Like season 1 is we get Matt in, you know, the black outfit, and in the final episodes is when we get him into the real Daredevil outfit. And like all the shows of that era were like that. And Daima as a streaming show feels like, and here we go at the final moment, we get the transformation into Super Saiyan 4. It does not work for me at all. And it's not just that they miss so much about it, from the emotional resonance of the transformation to they wanted to do the kneeling on the rock and they fucked up the kneeling on the rock scene. Like if you can't even get that, like if you don't understand what makes those individual moments and scenes and poses so iconic and emotionally resonant, yeah, this is what you end up with.
Yeah, 4 is an interesting one. You know, GT really did add real like emotional build up to it. You know, it is something that it comes about slowly and gradually and with real emphasis when it happens, and I think feels very special. In Daima, it's more of like a big surprise, and I'm really curious as to whether some kind of plans changed when it came to Super Saiyan 4. I guess I'll throw this to you, because I think, you know, you mentioned earlier that there are things in Daima where it almost feels like it contradicts itself based on episodes that came a couple episodes before. And I think that really comes across with how Super Saiyan 4 comes about, where in the final episode, Goku's like, oh, you know, I was working on it for a while and I wasn't sure if it would work. Okay, it worked, fine. You know, it was something he was trying to do himself. But in episode 18, you know, it's directed and conveyed in a way that almost feels like it came from Neva. We have this sequence of like blue converging with red through his veins, and it like bursts out, and Goku like looks at himself like, what is this?
Well, AJ, pause. Can you talk a little bit about what should have been in some of these scenes too, from the storyboards originally?
Yeah, so in the storyboards, it was originally envisioned or written as like this sort of energy from Never converging specifically with the Ozaru power of Goku, and like as he like burst out, there was going to be like a face of the Ozaru that like was in a sort of the beams that converged would form the shape of the Ozaru and kind of like roar at the screen. That was all cut, and instead it was just like water and fire kind of converging, and then the aura that Goku was going to have was like a fiery red from the Ozaru with like this calming water from Never, and there was like a whole page in the storyboard dedicated to talking about how, I want this to really convey the calming, sort of divine celestial feeling of the energy. Again, not to be confused with God Key. I'm not suggesting anything like that, but just like there was this idea of Never energy and Ozaru energy resulting in this Super Saiyan 4 kind of looking form thing, and none of that is present in the episode.
Yeah, and then to my earlier point, like, well, all we have to work with is what we are actually shown here. We don't get any of that, and so I can't use any of that to form my opinion of what I see on the screen here.
Yeah.
AJ, you saying that real quick about the Ozaru face. When Goku shoots that Kamehameha in episode 20, and then it suddenly is his own face that like bursts into the camera, was that supposed to also be an Ozaru face?
I actually don't know that. I'm afraid I don't have the board for 20, but I wouldn't be surprised.
It just missed opportunities. Ken, from the moment that Doug came up with this plan of the Ozaru and the pointy ears being from the demon realm, maybe we just talked ourselves into it too much over these last few months.
I don't think so. I think the show, early on, they say, not everyone with pointy ears is from the demon realm. But we also have Degasu point to Dende and say, your ears are pointy, that means you're from the demon realm. And then the show shows us everyone in the demon realm with pointy ears. And so I don't, okay, we're in lore territory now.
Yeah.
I guess. And I am very negative about the way that this show treats lore. However, it does make me happy because I like talking about it. So it's kind of a weird negative into a positive for me. This show is so messy and so sloppy, and I think they're working on a different time scale than everyone else. And I don't know how much of that comes from Toriyama himself or from Yuko Kakihara. But it's just the show as the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing in terms of trying to spin this story. I do think at some point the Ozaru ear was a key aspect of the science and where they come from. And I think AJ, you touching on the storyboard information about how things were supposed to look between Neva and Goku to suddenly bring back Ozaru again after not being mentioned at all in the entire show. I think those must have been the original plans, but it's the kind of thing that we'll never start knowing until we get a lot of post-mortem interviews with staff over the next 5-10 years.
And we're not. I feel like there's no way. Considering what little we got out of Super, I feel like there's no chance for knowledge of Daima.
Yeah.
It does bring into question Goku's line at the end about obtaining Super Saiyan 4 on his own. Was that originally there? When was that added? Was that in one of those things where it got sent and the Marvel cinematic universification of reshoots came into play and they decided to add that back in?
I want to talk about a couple more lore things, but let's just jump back to Super Saiyan 4 real quick. We didn't really talk about its design. We've got a small version of it. We've got a large version of it. At quick glance, it just looks like the Limit Breaker version of Super Saiyan 4 that we've had in Heroes recently, which is really just Super Saiyan 4 with red hair. There are some differences to it. I think the bigger monkey hands are interesting. AJ, one other thing I picked up from listening to y'all's show is the running on all fours version of Little Goku that was original to the animator that suggested that.
Yeah. The animator of that scene, Arno, and the director were like, yeah, let's lean into the monkey stuff for a scene. Would have been cool to see more of that. Yeah,
that's kind of one of my takeaways is I almost wish it feels like the wrong people feel too restricted about what liberties to take.
Yeah. There were certainly some moments, like there was a scene of like Goku using his tail to like flip around Gomar's arm and run around a bit. And I think, they used the scale of the kid version versus giant Gomar well, and that made for an exciting fight. But I think the interesting elements of the design, the big monkey hands and return of the tail. I think there was a lot of opportunity to really lean into that, the wild aspect of it that wasn't used as best as it could. I think that would have made it feel a lot more unique and different from GT's version. In terms of the design, I really do lean towards the original GT version, if only because I like the long furry arms and the way it like comes out under the wristband, and I love the contrast of the black hair and the red.
I do too. For me, it's the striking colorization of this with the black hair. GT is special to me for a few reasons. One is when I got into the series, GT was actually still on TV. I'm that old. Like, it was new. It had just ended when I started my website. And my first fan sub that I got was I coordinated an AOL chat room on a friend's computer before I actually had internet at home. And it was, I think, DBZ episodes 94 through 105. So it was like the end of the Frieza fight, all the Super Saiyan stuff. The first order I made myself from a fan subber or a distro was shortly thereafter, and it was the Bardock special and the Trunk special on one tape. It was movies 11 and 12 on another tape, and then it was GT Raw episodes 59 and 61 through 64. There's a lot of stuff back in the day where someone missed an episode, so the Gogeta episode was actually missing for a while from folks. So GT is so ingrained in my formative experiences, learning so much more about the series, and in particular, really diving into the Japanese version, that it is impossible for me to take Super Saiyan 4 out of the mix. What I see, what I feel when I look at that form. And so that's why it can't feel any more creatively bankrupt for me to see it here, trotted out in Daima the way it was.
I think the original GT Super Saiyan 4 was also created in balance with the way baby Vegeta looks.
Yes, and whose design and colorization I love.
Yeah, Goku's black hair versus baby's black bodysuit, Goku's yellow pants versus baby's yellow shoulders.
Blues and yellows. Yeah.
In balance between those two characters. And then you come into Daima and you have Goku's red, his orange pants against Goma's red and black. And so it's just you're already in the third demon or the first demon world in which everything's red and red compositing all over all the colors that were already there. It just kind of makes it a visual mess altogether. AJ, was this Toriyama's Super Saiyan 4?
That was going to be my question. Yeah.
I wish I knew. I've only ever seen the design sheets for them. They look like Nakatsuru to me, but like it's impossible to know, what Toriyama redrew, corrected, suggested. I said this in my video, but like my presumption would be that this was probably from Toriyama, if only because Goku's pants, like it's kind of a tracksuit now. And we know Toriyama sure loves those. Yeah, that's kind of the vibe that I get from it.
Just so folks don't start screaming at their iPods, because that's what they're listening to the show on, right? I am, of course, extremely well aware that Katsuyoshi Nakatsuru is the person who designed Super Saiyan 4 for Dragon Ball GT. So like I understand and respect the lineage of it and can see how multiple people may have wanted to bring it into the fold here. I still think it doesn't work. Even in this like reduced design, at least for me, there's still something really fucking incredible about the look of Super Saiyan 4, even with its red hair, even with some of these design differences. I'm just not excited to see it this way, the same way that I wasn't jazzed about, great, Cannon Broly, okay, sure. It feels the same to me. It's a continuation of the design by committee that we had starting with the Future Trunks arc of Super, and then onward from there. And I can't extract it from any of that.
I do like this Super Saiyan 4. I do like it.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily... it will never supplant GT's Super Saiyan 4 for me, ever.
Yeah.
And even like... So everything comes down to me, and Doug as well, to an extent, of how much we like the character is a record of, are we buying their figure or not?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I will be buying adult Super Saiyan 4 Daima Goku, in case anyone's wondering and has that on the bingo sheet. Yeah, that will be happening.
I gotta get the original before I get this one.
Yeah, I'm with you on it. Like, I really love Super Saiyan 4. I think it looks cool. It's fun to watch. It looks nice. Narratively, it's not super satisfying, but like I'm not mad about it. Like, this is where I sort of battle with myself.
Do I sound mad about it?
You don't sound mad about it, but you sound very upset.
I am passionate.
Just like a disappointed teacher.
I'm not angry. I'm just disappointed.
Yeah, like a pupil has like handed you homework that's like been copied from someone else, but it's slightly different, and you're just like, you've been doing this for the past couple of years, kid. Come on. Like that's the vibe I'm getting.
Okay.
But,
anyway, continue.
Yeah. I don't remember what I was saying.
I figured I was going to interrupt you.
Super Saiyan 4 is kind of cool, I guess. It's just not super narratively exciting. But yeah, that's what I was going to say. Like, there's almost like a battle in my brain where I look at stuff like Super and I think about how mad I was. Oh my God, they're bringing back Frieza, or oh my God, Kale is basically Broly.
Yeah, we did Broly multiple times.
Stuff. Like, yeah, like it's weird for me that so much of Super feels creatively bankrupt and really leaning heavily on nostalgia, like doing like Vegeta's sacrifice again in the Tournament of Power, that when it comes to Daima, so much of it felt fresh, albeit not, amazingly executed, but it felt fresh and authentic to Dragon Ball, that like when it got to Super Saiyan 4, I was kind of like, okay, you can have that. Fine.
Ken, do you have there's other places I want to go, but there are other lore things you want to mention here? I mean, we already talked about the Rymus ping. We haven't talked a whole lot about Katats and the Namekian timeline. Is it worth getting into any of that stuff, or is it enough to just say, like, they don't know what they're doing here?
The series was created with a pretty, intentional ignorance of a lot of stuff that had come before it.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily mean that in a bad way, even though I chose like the worst word you could use there. You can write off a lot of stuff that happens, right? You can say Neva is 5 million years old, and that is a guidebook number based on a statement from Kaioshin in the manga to place when everything with Boo went down.
Yeah.
You can say that Neva met Katats because Neva says the last time he saw a Namekian was tens of thousands of years ago. You can say that was Katats, and you can say somewhere along the way he got, unnaturally long lifespan. You can say that Degasu and Kaioshin met 1,000 years ago. It's just that for me, I'm so lore pilled. This is a lot of the, as a wiki editor and just kind of doing stuff on my own terms, that's a lot of stuff that I'm very interested in. And so that's where I found a lot of frustrations in the show, but you can write a lot of that off and you can explain it. And it's the kind of thing of why I would love to see a Toyotaro adaptation of this story or adaptation, is that he would iron out a lot of that kind of stuff. That's the way, unfortunately, he and I have the same kind of brain in certain ways like that. He would iron all that out. So it's not so much of a complaint as it is. It's just that it kept happening over and over and over of stuff. Again, obviously I don't expect it to line up with Super. That's okay. We knew that from the first second of the first episode. And before that, even with trailers, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with it not lining up with the original series. That's okay too. I'm less okay with one episode not lining up with the one that came before it. So I'm curious. I forget even what your original question was, but I care about the timeline stuff. And it didn't really line up for me, but not in a way that you couldn't just write a lot of that off. So I don't know if they didn't know what they were doing or they intentionally were like, we're not going to let this hold us back in telling the story.
Right. And that's a Toriyama thing, is like, he's not beholden to anything that came before, whether it's, I love the Bardock TV special. Hey, check this shit out. There's an entirely different version of all this. But there's something different about that directly from the pen of the author himself on the printed page versus something like this going through so many people into a TV series. Are there any other larger topics anyone has they want to bring up and dive into?
Yeah, I mean, I had a couple comments on this where my perspective on it is that, like, and I'm sorry, Ken, I don't really care about what's said in guidebooks. I just don't. For me, it's like, how does this line up with what I've seen on screen? And how necessary were these contradictions to telling the story. And I think a lot of the stuff in Daima that serves as a big contradiction, I'm kind of like, there are very easy ways to make this line up, or at least explain why something appeared here and didn't appear elsewhere or whatever. Like some of the basic stuff, it's like, you know, Kibito and Koshin, like the fusing stuff there, you could have had literally anything to explain that. You know, the Super Saiyan 4 stuff, you could have done anything there. But it sort of felt like they weren't concerned with that at all. I mean, obviously, we know Daima started as a side story, and then Toriyama came in and, you know, started changing things. And as you said, Mike, like he doesn't really care that much about continuity. There's that, you know, 2015 Resurrection F quote of just like, yeah, it kind of sucks for scriptwriters who think they have to like care about all this stuff. I'm the author and whatever, I can do what I want. Yeah, like I have lenience to that stuff, in the sense that, you know, if you want to change stuff to tell a really cool story and those changes feel worthwhile, great. But if you're changing stuff and it doesn't really affect anything, then it starts to feel a little bit careless and a bit more upsetting that way.
Yeah, and for me, it was death by 1,000 cuts, with that kind of thing just repeatedly happening through the show.
Where I'd like to wrap up, again, unless anyone has any larger things they want to chat about, we are going to push 2 hours on this. We'll see how far we end up going here. I think it's a good length for an arc review, not a 4-hour one here. I enjoyed watching Dragon Ball Daima. There's a lot that I feel very strongly about from a critical view on it, but moment to moment, I was generally smiling and having a good time watching the show. There'd be moments where, whether it was the 6th plane crash or flying away from the military guns, I'm like, what am I doing here? I can't wait for this to be over. But you know, generally, moment to moment, I had a good time with the show. I'm glad it was produced. I thought there was some fun stuff here. I'm not going to watch it again anytime soon. I'm sorry, Ken.
I don't recommend doing what I did.
Yeah, that is crazy. But I think that's how I feel too, where like I can sit here and as I sat on a podcast for 40 something hours over the past 5 months and like pick apart so many aspects of this show that I find frustrating. But at the end of it all, I'm like, I really enjoyed Daima, and like, I'm not like super sad that it's over now, but I really enjoyed its moment to moment vibes. Again, I keep saying vibes because I think like that's what was so pivotal for me, for my enjoyment of the show, where like scenes would just ooze this Toriyama energy. There's like a specific way of either comedy or like transitioning from scene to scene or doing characters that is so hard to replicate. He was so good at it. And I feel like that really comes across in Daima and plays a real large part in why I'm okay pushing aside some of those very clear critical issues with it and just going, man, that was a really fun ride in spite of all of that. I agree that I'm not in like a super big rush to go through it all again. It's hard to know whether that's because of how I felt about the show as a whole or because I just did fucking 5 months of insane content creation. Good Lord. But you know, it was a really fun experience, and it would be interesting to reflect on it, seeing where things go now in a very, you know, tragically post-Toriyama world.
I don't know how I felt about the series watching it at the time, and I think the person to ask this, actually, AJ, might be you, because you and I would message each other a lot watching these episodes so live. So, AJ, how did I feel about Dragon Ball Daima?
You are the biggest Daima hater I've ever come across.
AJ's probably got comments from both of us that actually answer this question.
Oh my God. Ken every week was like, Kakihara has never read a guidebook in her life. I think she actively despises this series. Gloria might be the worst conceived character of all time. Oh my God. I hate they've done 20 reaction shots of the same thing in one episode. Man, Daima is the worst thing ever. And then I would like glance in the Kanzenshuu Discord and Mike would be like, what are we doing here? Okay. So I guess we got to talk about Daima now, right? So I think Ken was rage and Mike was apathy. And I don't know what I would be.
So I know I seem like I'm mad about this show, and I would say I'm just passionate, and I like to talk about it, I get excited talking about the things that make me mad, I guess. So from that angle, I really enjoyed talking about Daima. Maybe it wasn't the best for my health, but I did enjoy that aspect. And like I said, going back on rewatch, I think those first 8 episodes ended up being super crazy strong, and I liked Glorio. So there was a different experience. I know, right? Watching it all as in one go. I don't know if I will ever watch it again. To me, Daima is a side thing that I'm ready to just put back on the shelf and kind of, my man Toyotaro, where are we going with Black Frieza? I need to know. That's what we're doing.
Ken, we're playing Daima. Don't you forget.
Yeah. And I honestly, legitimately think there's a chance that the Kakarot version of Daima will be its best version.
So, quick tease. So, both these folks are going to be back. Ken, we're going to talk about the Daima DLC for Kakarot as soon as that drops. AJ, you're coming back next month. I'm sorry to break it to everyone, but Resurrection F is 10 years old.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Oh, don't make me watch it again. I don't want to do it.
So we're going to do that. Ken, especially in light of the recent trailer we got for the Daima DLC, like, oh shit, Goku's fighting against the military folks there in that town. That actually looks pretty fun.
And the Kakarot writers really know what they're doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I'm looking forward to seeing them interpret Daima, and maybe they could do what I was hoping Toyotaro could be able to do with some of the little issues.
So let's wrap this up then with just a nice, positive, a big hype moment that you had during the show. I'm going to start it off with Neva sliding across the screen and nudging Tamagami to get into the fight, and having the Tamagami join the fight. The resulting stuff wasn't all that exciting, but there were a couple moments in there where we had the interaction where like Do and the Tamagami were holding back the blast, and Do was wrapping around and the Tamagami came in for the slice. There were a couple moments in there. I was like, oh shit, here we go. This is it. We finally arrived here. Unfortunately, it was followed by fall down, get up, fall down, get up, fall down, get up, fall down, get up. But Tamagami joined the fight. That was it for me. Ken, how about you?
Mine's kind of a 2-for-1. It's the show presenting to us that Vegeta and Bulma have a healthy sexual relationship. I think is really nice, in between Vegeta's preferences and then Bulma threatening to never bathe with him again. I think are really fun. You know, you talked a little bit about the character work in the show. I think the character work in the show has been stellar, and honestly, its strongest point. And I don't think I can be convinced of anything otherwise with that.
Yeah.
And just the handling of Vegeta and Bulma, to me, felt really special because it's pulling back the curtain on something we really don't get a lot from them.
Yeah. Probably the biggest laugh out loud moment in the show there.
Yeah, they've really nailed the comedy. And you're so right about the characters. We didn't get a chance to quite touch on that specific aspect, but they all do feel like their authentic selves, which is like a real 180 from Super that was all over the place in terms of how people were handled.
Do we get a single Waku Waku from Goku in this show?
I don't think so.
No, I don't think so.
Then it's the best Goku.
I was listening for Waku Waku as much as I was listening for Nameka's Seijin.
Oh, man. Yeah. But in terms of, my favorite moments, you stole 2 of them there. I absolutely adored the Vegeta preference moment and the bathing stuff. That was great. But honestly, like, just Hybis bullying Vegeta in general.
Yeah,
Hybis in general, just great in every scene, from like complaining about not being able to go to the hair salon, or like, shall I do you a victory dance? Or like being sad that his hat is gone and having a cold head. Just like so much amazing stuff from that. And it's going to sound silly that my favorite moment is the end of the show, but man, that gag post-credits scene, the eyes just have been there all along, just nothing. So
how
funny.
old is that shopkeep? Or maybe the store at bare minimum. Maybe it's been inherited a few times.
At least 100,000, 100 million years, at least.
So we've gotten this far, and Ken, you may think I've forgotten about it, but I saved it for the end. And that is something I've shamelessly stolen from one of my favorite podcasts, Just King Things, going through the works of Stephen King chronological order. One of my favorite parts of the show is the 5-sentence summary. And that is summarizing, you're encouraged to use and describe all the punctuation in the world. I want to hear your parentheses, your semicolons, everything that you can use as part of language. To summarize Dragon Ball Daima here in 5 sentences. Ken, you joked at me the other day. You're like, hey, you're going to make me do it. You're going to say AJ's going to do it, but no, actually you're going to put it back on me. And that's true. So Ken, Ken, could you summarize for us Dragon Ball Daima in 5 sentences?
Dabra is dead, semicolon. His successor, Goma, in an effort to make sure that the demon realm remains his, turns Goku and friends into children and kidnaps their guardian, Dende. Sentence 1. Sentence 2. Glorio, a Majin from the demon realm, recruits Goku and friends and brings them back to the demon realm in order to collect the demon realm Dragon Balls. And they have different missions, period. Sentence number 3.
Nice.
Everyone collects the Dragon Balls, and Reintroduced creates 2 new Majin, Ku and Du, period. Goma's efforts lead him to collecting the 3rd eye, and he uses it to become a giant kaiju, or sometimes the scale gets iffy, slightly less kaiju version of himself. And in a huge battle between himself and everyone else, he is defeated. Period. Sentence 5. Ku is the new leader of the demon realm, and everybody loves it. And if you have an issue with it, I don't want to talk to you because it's great and the best thing ever. Comma. Everyone goes back home. Period.
Incredible job. You did it.
Well done. I'm so proud of you. I'm very glad that wasn't put on me. I think I would have frozen up and fucked up the first sentence.
I had given it a few thoughts during showers, so
you seemed well prepared during sentence 1, and then grew increasingly distressed as we went there.
Yeah. Yep. I'm sweating like crazy.
Love it. Appreciate it. Folks, that's Dragon Ball Daima. Here we are at a crossroads with the franchise where this was the latest thing. It's over. Dragon Ball Super manga. We got 1 extra bonus chapter, really just to flesh out Volume 24 collected edition in Japan. That's due out about a month from now. If you don't know, and I've tried to tell people about this, the back of V-Jump every issue says and continues to say, back to saying, Dragon Ball Super will be on hiatus next issue. It still says that. It didn't say that the issue right before we had the bonus chapter. Now it's back to saying that. Dragon Ball Super Divers sort of exists. I feel like there's been some scuttlebutt recently about how successful is that game. There's a single manga for it that's in Psycho Jump. It's only in the single digits chapters right now. That's where Dragon Ball is right now. We've had promises of perhaps some future productions. Are we going to get a new movie? Be curious to see what actually comes out, under what name, under what sub-brand of Dragon Ball, if a sub-brand at all. We're kind of in a holding pattern video game-wise, where Sparking and even Xenoverse and Kakarot are getting Daima materials, so we're just going to live off that for a little bit. Ken, what do you want next?
Moro, come on, dude. I just want something. And does it come down to this supposed legal battle that's going on between Shueisha and Capsule Corp? Who has the rights to what? And I think that may decide how quickly we get to Moro or not. So I would just like to see that in literally any form. Beyond that, I'd like to see Toyotaro continue on with the manga.
AJ, what do you want next?
I'm going to be really miserable and lame. I enjoyed Moro, and it would be cool to see it, but I despised Granola so much that I feel like to get Moro would mean to get Granola, and I don't know that trade-off is worth it. As far as what I want, I really don't know. Like, I just don't know how interested I am in Dragon Ball without Toriyama's oversight. You know, Toyotaro, maybe he's got it in him. I don't know. We'll see. I will of course consume it all. Just one of the parts of being a Dragon Ball fan. You consume everything, even painful things like Heroes. But, you know, we'll see. I'm obviously open to it, but at the moment I'm just kind of like, big question mark. What are we going to do? How is it going to feel? yeah, I couldn't tell you.
You're touching on something interesting there, AJ, about Dragon Ball without Toriyama's oversight. And I think a lot of people have been under the impression that Daima is the last say we're ever getting from Toriyama. Obviously, he was working on it up until the point that he died, but there's got to be stuff out there still with his...
Oh, I'm sure. For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, knowing the time length of movies and the pre-production on those and what the ideation is for those, there may even be a complete script, for all we know, of something out there. As it relates to manga arcs for whether it remains to be called Super, if there is anything else, Toriyama, Toyotaro, and Uchida would have those meetings long before an arc started. We may have an outline. We may just have a blessing of a next thing. At this point, I would love to take a break again. There's so much old stuff I want to do and catch up on. I would like Toyotaro to have his final say, though, whether that be Black Frieza, whether that be something. I think I would like to see him tie it up to the 28th Budokai, but then to have that Budokai and ending retold without Toriyama, I don't know if I want that. I think I would have wanted that if Toriyama was still around. That's the part I'm unsure about now, because I don't think anyone can or should do that.
Timeline-wise, of course, I'll jump in here and say this. We're in a real tight space between Superhero and the 28th Tenkaichi Budokai. So should Black Frieza already take place beyond that? It's hard to say, but I don't know if we should... And I wouldn't want Toyotaro to ever retell the ending of Dragon Ball, but I think it could be cute if he ends it and you see from Goku's perspective right as Vegeta and Bulma are on their way to come see him and end it there. But
yeah. I mean, Toriyama already redid the Dragon Ball ending, so I don't want it redone a third time. Folks, that was Dragon Ball Daima. I had a great time. Thank you so much for joining me. You are wonderful folks to chat with. I appreciate you, your opinions, and your time. Ken, you're about to do it all over again, huh?
Yeah. So in a few days, I'll be recording with Randy and Doug talking about just episode 20, and then we will probably touch on our thoughts on the whole. I would enjoy editing a shorter episode, so I hopefully we don't go our normal length of an hour and 45 minutes. But I'd like to end it there.
AJ, admittedly, I still have 40 minutes left in your most recent episode about episode 20. So I'm sorry I couldn't finish it in time, but
all good.
Y'all have a full archive of contemporary reflections episode by episode. So
we sure do. We're all done there. Yep. Things are looking good for my channel after the slight bump in the road there. So it should just be episodes 19 and 20 for me to finish up. And then I will be ignoring Dragon Ball again for however long. Great. Two follow-up questions. One with regards to YouTube. What did we learn? Don't tempt the beast.
Okay. And then I guess just for Mark's channel in general, y'all do a final comprehensive review at some point. You said you like doing the evergreen stuff, so I assume that'll come. Yeah,
Mark's doing Jujutsu Kaisen at the moment, and then I think he'll probably touch on Daima in like a month or so. So yeah, look forward to that.
Cool. All right. Well, Ken, thank you. Thank you, of course, also to Randy and Doug. And also thanks to Tyson, who didn't show up at all for the last few months at Mario Kart to talk about Daima. But that's fine. That's fine. Thank you, everyone. Let's just bring this show to a close. We got a podcast over there. You got Totally Not Mark associated materials over there. Totally Not a Pod. Check it out. As for me, www.kanzenshuu.com. Folks, do we have podcasts coming your way? I need to get to work right now because I have a backlog of things that are coming. I guess I'll just tease it with, we're coming into interview season. Strap in. There's so much cool stuff coming your way. I'm excited. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it. Kanzenshuu.com. Patreon.com/Kanzenshuu, Twitch.tv/VegitoEX, GrabYourNearest.com. We'll see you next time here at Kanzenshuu, the podcast. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Shout outs to Hybus one last time.